In the early morning hours of January 3rd, the United States carried out a truly extraordinary military operation.
Operation Absolute Resolve was discreet, precise. It involved more than 150 aircraft to bring to justice two indicted persons, Nicolas and Cecilia Maduro.
In my opinion, this was an operation foretold. The administration, since August of 2025, had overseen one of the largest naval buildups in the Western Hemisphere. It started in early September with a campaign of striking suspected narco-laden vessels. It then moved to a quarantine against sanctioned oil vessels. This was all meant to bring greater pressure on the Maduro regime to find the exits. He didn't, and the president moved forward with Operation Absolute Resolve. The operation also comes about a month after the release of the administration's National Security Strategy document, which was very heavy on its focus on Latin America and the Caribbean. There was a concept of a Trump Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine is alive and well in the 21st century, and I think the actions show that what is written in the NSS is guiding the second Trump administration.
This isn't a country that's on the other side of the world. It's in our area, the Donroe Doctrine.
The Monroe Doctrine was promulgated in 1823 when the United States was not a hemispheric power. It was barely a blip on the global radar screen. So the Monroe Doctrine was very much an aspirational doctrine. And what it did was essentially say that we had solidarity with newly formed republics in the Western Hemisphere. We said, we don't want European colonial powers returning to the Western Hemisphere. We saw more countries on the horizon, in other words, that looked exactly like ours, and we wanted to nurture those political projects. But you can't talk about the Monroe Doctrine without talking about the Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. In the late 1800s and the early 1900s, the United States is not just becoming a global power, but it's also building a world-class navy. In the Roosevelt Corollary period, the United States began to intervene to exercise police power and to shape the region's politics in the U.S. interest. This was a much more muscular approach to the hemisphere, much the same as we're seeing today under the Trump administration.
The corollary really rests on three principles: fighting drug trafficking and migration in the region, reducing the influence of China and other powers from the region, and controlling of strategic locations. The one that led to the action in Venezuela, of course, is the question of drug trafficking. This has been the issue that the entire deployment of the naval armada in the Caribbean since August was framed around. And the removal of President Maduro has also been framed as a law enforcement, as a counter-drug operation.
And then the strategic assets in Venezuela, of course, refers in this case to its vast petroleum reserves. The way that China, the way that Russia, the way that Iran, the way that Cuba was able to get access to that oil is of concern to the Trump Corollary. Looking outside of Venezuela, I think the Trump Corollary has implications for really the entire Western Hemisphere.
The Trump administration has made no secret of its desire to see the Mexican government step up significantly its own efforts to fight drugs. The president has also talked about Colombia, particularly criticizing the Colombian president, Gustavo Petro. Let's be clear that the Colombian government is not involved in any sorts of drug trafficking, unlike the Venezuelan government. But the president at various points had sort of indicated that maybe Colombia might be a target of some sort of unilateral action against drugs.
Outside of Venezuela, I'm looking at the other authoritarian countries, Cuba, Nicaragua. What does the United States do next with those countries? The president will likely return to the issue of the ports at the ends of the Panama Canal. And of course, Greenland has entered the conversation in terms of a strategically vital location for more U.S. bases. They'll also be interested in not just petroleum, but mining reserves, boxing out, in particular, China, which has become a massive and influential mining power. I think they will also be interested in a lot of the digital technologies that countries are adopting. And I think the United States will be very interested in seeing less Huawei, less CTE, and more US partner companies in the region. Who builds your digital backbone also has an impact on who is your preferred partner in AI. So the Trump Corollary is truly hemispheric.
The NSS essentially says that countries that cooperate with this agenda will be benefited. And it may work with other countries that are not necessarily friendly with the United States, but share certain objectives. Whether they're objectives that have become an interest because the United States has put pressure on those countries, I think is immaterial. But in the Venezuelan context now, we have the United States working with the remnants of a regime which is ideologically opposed to the United States, but seems to be working towards certain objectives that the Trump administration has outlined.
My recommendation is for the US government to have a very specific conversation on the sectors in which it wants to compete most intensely with China. If you're trying to compete everywhere, you're not competing effectively anywhere. So there ultimately needs to be a conversation on what are those 3 to 5 key areas where we want to harness these competitive instincts of the Trump Corollary and push hard in terms of Latin American partnerships with US private sector companies.